Hello, everybody. In this session, we're going to have Trip, Corbin Trip, tell us about ArcGIS Pro. Is it ready to be your daily GIS app? And I will let him introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great conference so far and really enjoyed all the presentations. I am always happy to come up and be a part of this. So yeah, we're going to be taking a look at ArcGIS Pro and whether it's ready now to be your daily driver. As said, I am Trip Corbin. I am now a business development manager for SAM Surveying and Mapping, one of the largest geospatial solutions providers in the country. We are an Esri business partner. Just recently became a system-ready specialty partner and a marketplace provider. We're also the second user of Trimble technologies in the U.S. The only one bigger than us is the federal government. So we get to play with a lot of their toys before they get out to the market, help Trimble test them and provide feedback on that. So hopefully it works when you get your hands on it. We have 40 offices spread across the U.S. and into Canada, 3 here in North Carolina, 4 down in Georgia. And apparently now we're on, okay, there's back. And 1 in South Carolina. So we've got it covered pretty good. As far as services we provide, this is the list. I'm not going to read this to you because, well, you can do that yourself. So that's enough about that. Let's get in and talk about ArcGIS Pro and whether it's time, if you haven't already made the switch, to do so. Now, I've been using Arc Pro since when it was in beta, before even 1.0 came out. I've had the opportunity to work with it pretty closely. I've written 3 books on the application. I actually beat Esri to the punch. I got my book out before they got theirs out, which they weren't always thrilled about, but that's okay. And I'm currently working on a 4th one. So I've had the opportunity to really work with it, play with it, get to know it, know the good, the bad, and the ugly associated with this application. Is it perfect? God, no. Not even going to try to go there. But I am a big fan of it. I found there's been a lot of reluctance. How many of y'all have migrated or started using Pro at least a little bit? Okay, a good chunk of y'all. How many of y'all remember when ArcGIS, ArcMap, ArcCatalog first rolled out? Okay, y'all remember the fun that was? You remember all the pains we had with that? Oh my God, what is this piece of garbage Esri has put out there? Give me my ArcInfo, my ArcView GIS. Give me those back. Don't take that from me. And here we are, over 20 years later. If y'all don't know this, ArcMap and ArcCatalog first rolled out in 1999. Tell me any other application that hasn't changed dramatically in over a 20-year period. Take a look at AutoCAD. Take a look at Office, the Office suite. Take a look at the Adobe products. Then take a look at ArcGIS. This is the first major change that they've had since ArcGIS first rolled out. If I were to put a seat, and I'm not going to go to 8.0, which is the very first version of ArcGIS. It started at 8, which makes a lot of sense, I know. But that's how it did. It was part of the ArcInfo thing. Anyway, if I put a seat of ArcGIS 8.3 in your hands, even if you're an Arc 10.3 or 10.8 or 10.9 user, you could start using it without a whole lot of problem, right? No other application has been as consistent as that. So yeah, now we're going into Arc Pro and no one is that happy about it. Now, I did in December at the Land of Sky Regional Council in Asheville. I did a migrating to Arc Pro training class, and I had one young lady in there that was like, "You're going to pry ArcMap out of my cold, dead hands." By the end of that class, she had completely reversed herself. So, yeah, I think Arc Pro's come a long way. And it's not really a new product anymore, in my mind. It was first released in 2015. That was, 8 years ago now? So it's had 8 years of development, and Esri's really been putting a lot of effort into it because it is a completely new product. It's not an update to Arc Desktop. It is wholly built on a whole new architecture. It's .NET based, meaning it's also 64-bit. Whereas ArcMap and ArcCatalog and ArcScene, ArcGlobe were 32-bit applications. Why do we care about that? What's a limit, or what are some limits of a 32-bit application? Yeah, only 4 gigs of RAM. You can have 128 gigs of RAM in your computer. ArcMap's never going to see it, doesn't care about it. Then we also get into things like hyperthreading. How many of y'all have a computer that has multiple cores? Pretty much everybody probably ought to raise your hand. Dual core, quad core. We're up to 6, 12, 20 core processors now. That didn't exist when ArcMap came out. So it's not really designed to make use of your modern computer. Even a very low computer has more power than what we had in 1999. So Arc Pro is able to leverage the computing power we now have available to us that ArcMap really was never designed for. So it is going to replace. Now I've heard that Esri is hedging their bets on when they're fully deprecating ArcMap and ArcCatalog. I'm going to pick on Joseph since he's sitting over here in the corner. Do you know 20? Is it? Okay, I've heard they were extending that by another couple of years to 2026, but, oh yeah, it still works, but there's no support and all that. So just know that that is happening. Now, the current version that rolled out last week, I think, was 3.1. I got a chance to install it. I will tell you this. In my experience, 3.x or 3.0 dot whatever was the most buggy version that they'd released since 1.0. They've released several patches. Now, I said I just installed 3.1. I haven't had a lot of time to play with it to see how much better it is. But I also know that one of the later versions of 2 had issues with some Microsoft updates as well. So, but if you install the latest patch for 2.x, it fixes that problem. So, like I said, is it perfect? No, not by a long shot. It has issues. But even after 20 years, I mean, how many times does ArcMap crash or do something weird for you, right? Same is true of AutoCAD and other things. Now, one of the biggest roadblocks or bumps into moving into Arc Pro is hardware. Just because your computer can run ArcMap and ArcCatalog and ArcScene, ArcGlobe without an issue, don't expect that it will always run Arc Pro. You really want to make sure you have a beefy system or you're going to have a very bad experience trying to use Pro. I had to write a letter for Jackson County, Georgia, their GIS department, to go to their IT department because they were trying to get new computers and IT was like, no, you don't need anything that big or that beefy or whatever. But yeah, you're going to absolutely need something pretty beefy. So this minimum, don't even try the minimum. Yeah, it'll install and it might open at that minimum level that Esri puts out there. You're not going to, you open one map and it's going to crash on you. It's going to drag, it's going to run slow. This recommended system, I would say, is okay if you're a basic user. And I don't mean the software basic license. I mean, you're just opening and looking at a map, printing a map, exporting to PDF, maybe basic queries, that kind of thing. So that recommended base level would be okay for that. If you're going to be a power user, if you're going to be doing 3D visualizations, you're going to be processing LiDAR data, you're going to be building geodatabases, you're working in the utility network, those kind of things, building digital twins, then you definitely need to go to this optimal level. So, I was helping somebody last night, as a matter of fact, try to spec out a system they were trying to buy to do Arc Pro work on, as well as some other things. And they were looking at like $5,000 for a workstation. So you can expect that kind of level, unless you're like me and build computers yourself, you can look at that kind of expense when you're trying to do this. But you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention, that you've got those cores so you can support the hyper-threading in there, that you've got plenty of RAM. Arc Pro loves RAM, right? There's no such thing as too much. And you also want to make sure you have this dedicated graphics card. Do not use integrated graphics. See? How do you know if you have integrated graphics? Or do you even know what integrated graphics is? Hey, so integrated graphics is where your computer's primary CPU and your RAM handle the graphics load in addition to handling all the other things with the operating system, file management, those kind of things. So it's also processing whatever rendering's going on the screen, Some of your analysis tools, especially when you get into raster analysis, working with LiDAR data, also are able to leverage a GPU, a graphics processor. So usually you can tell if you look at a workstation in the back, you may see a card in one of the slots with video connections, HDMI or DVI or whatever in there. That's going to tell you you have a separate graphics card in there and you're not using integrated graphics, but you definitely want to make sure you have a dedicated graphics card in there. If you can't get that because of cost reasons or availability, there was, in the last couple of years, trying to get a GPU was almost impossible unless you were willing to pay twice the recommended cost of one of those things. But now they've become much more available in there. And I will say this, it looks like Esri has optimized ArcGIS to run with NVIDIA-based cards. That's a manufacturer. You have NVIDIA, AMD, and now Intel making video cards or GPUs. So it looks like, based on all the documentation I'm seeing, that NVIDIA is who that Esri's working their drivers and stuff with. So just something to do. Anyway, now talking about functionality. So 2015, when Arc Pro first rolled out, there was a lot of stuff that it couldn't do. I had a much greater list of things it couldn't do than things it could do when 1.0 rolled out. That has since changed. I just came from the Esri Business Partner Conference out in Palm Springs earlier this week, and Esri has announced that they've achieved parity with ArcMap as far as functionality. Now, that's a bit of a rub in that how you define parity, because there are things that Arc Pro doesn't do, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, that it'll never do that ArcMap does. So basically they're saying, we're not going to do these things, but we've done all these other things, so now we've achieved parity because we're just ignoring this other stuff there. But having said that, they've done a good job of incorporating most all of the functionality that we've had in ArcMap to this point in Arc Pro. I know when Arc Pro first came out, one of the biggest things that scared the bejesus out of us as GIS folks was the fact that when you opened a project, and that's what we have now. We have these project files. If anybody remembers the old ArcView GIS APRs, they're back. They're just called APRXs. But we're back into that project mode. But when you open that project and then you open a map in that project, you are automatically always in an edit session. So if you had editable data from a shapefile or a geodatabase or whatever it was that was editable, there was no starting and stopping editing. You would, oh, I'm here typing. Oops, I've overwritten something in an attribute table. Oh, I've accidentally selected something and hit the delete key. There went my city limits. And you might not even realize you did it. Okay? So yeah, that terrified the bejesus out of a lot of us moving over there. But I think Esri did that because every other application, you're in an edit set. You open a Word doc, you can edit it. You open an AutoCAD file, you can edit it. It follows more standard workflow. But Esri recognized, because we screen bloody murder, quite literally in some cases, hey, let's have that back. So now they've actually set in an option. Now, it's not the default. You have to enable the option, but they have set it up so you can make it so you have to start and stop editing, similar to what you did in ArcMap. They've just recently, in 3.1, added back the auto-resize of map elements so that when you start changing scale, things auto-resize like they used to in the layouts in ArcMap. That's now been added in there. They've added the magnifier window back. If anybody used that in ArcMap when you're doing edits and looking at things, that's now in at 3.1. One of the big things when it first rolled out too was it didn't support map anno, right? So just putting graphic text into the map, you couldn't do that. But now with 3.1 and earlier, I think this came out in 2, you can do map anno. So they've gone a long way to add things, geodatabase annotation, map graphics, added charts, reports, advanced editing tools like copy parallel, for example, have been added in there. You can now also, I think this came out with 2.9, connect it to a GNSS unit. So if you want to put Arc Pro on a laptop, go out in the field and hook it up to a GPS antenna and collect data that way, you can do it. Again, we could do that in ArcMap. I don't know how many people did, but it was possible. Extent indicators in layout, so you can do inset maps and show where one is in relation to the other. That's in there now. A lot of symbology we've achieved parity with. So it took a while, but they finally got chart symbology and dot densities in there, as well as several other types of symbology that you didn't have before. So we've got a lot of that. Some new things that ArcPro brings that we didn't have in ArcMap, 3D visualization. Right? So being able to look at your data 3D, and I tell you from coming from the Business Partner Conference, they're pushing this 3D thing hard. Digital twins, I'm sure y'all have heard of that. So being able to model and render things in 3D is a big deal. That's core functionality. You don't have to have the 3D Analyst extension to do that anymore. That's pretty cool. They've added autosave. So for both your project as well as your data edits. So you can enable that so you don't have to do that, oh my God, I forgot to save, and your system crash on you. Like we've had in ArcMap. How many times has that happened to us, right? Project recovery files, so if something does crash, your project gets corrupted, there's usually a backup copy there that'll auto-recover for you. So there's some good things in here. Better support for BIM or CAD. I found out in working on my new book, talking about working with CAD data, I brought in a CAD file that actually had a projection saved directly in the DWG file. You couldn't read that before. It was in a proprietary part of the CAD file. Now it does. This CAD file I brought in, that in AutoCAD map I assigned a projector to, popped right in and projected on the fly. That was cool. I didn't even have to have a PRJ file for it or a WLD. Right? So better support for CAD, attribute rules and contingent values. So being able to apply rules and validation to your database aside from just domains and subtypes is something that's there. Branch versioning is in there now. So for web applications and web editing, that's supported that you couldn't do in ArcMap. And the AI is in there, arcade expression language. So they have been adding a lot of functionality that we didn't have in ArcMap. That's some good stuff. Now, the bad, the ugly. There's some things that ArcPro does not do and will not do based on what Esri's saying. So first off, how many of y'all have been using geometric networks? Yep, that's never going to happen in ArcPro. They're moving to the utility network and something called the trace network. So the trace network is fairly new. I think it came out 2 years ago, maybe, and it's closest thing to a direct equivalent to the geometric network. And there's actually a tool in ArcPro to convert from a geometric network to a trace network. I haven't tried it yet, so I don't know how well it works, but it's in there. And ultimately, the trace network is an intermediary step to the full-on utility network, so which Esri is now redubbing from being just kind of a data model into a full network management solution. At least that's what they were telling us at the Business Partner Conference as we were drinking our Kool-Aid there. How many of y'all have used cartographic representations? Rules-based symbology. Okay, a few of y'all, ArcPro does not support that, and I don't expect it will. They want you to start using arcade expressions to do those kind of things. And they've added some new things like catalog layers that have greater control over when things appear and how they appear, things of that nature that just came out with 3.1. How many of y'all know what a coverage is? Okay, wow, more than I expected. That's great. I don't feel as old now. So coverages, how many of y'all are using personal geodatabases still? Okay, a few of y'all, yeah, ArcPro is not going to support those. Matter of fact, it can't even read them, right? If you can do an OLE connection to it because it's an access file, but it's not going to read the spatial data. It'll read tabular data, but it won't read the spatial data. So you're going to need to port that over to file geodatabases from there. And if you've converted to the old ArcMap parcel fabric, ArcPro doesn't support that. There isn't actually an ArcPro parcel fabric you'll have to convert to as well. So if you did that conversion, you're going to have to do another conversion into that. So, but the good thing is anything you've created in ArcMap, you can pretty much bring into ArcPro. So you can import all your MXDs in there, and I usually do a demo of this, but because I'm not using my laptop, don't have Pro, but MXD, layer files, layer packages, map packages, SDE connections, toolboxes, all of those things you can bring right back into ArcPro. They come in very seamlessly. unless you got something really weird or funky or custom in there. But they come across pretty easy. So anything you create in ArcMap, you can bring into Pro. The same is not true going the other way. Databases, yes. Shapefiles, yes. But maps, layer files, all of that are not backwards compatible from Pro into ArcMap. So with that, because I know we're close to time here, I hope you enjoyed it. I really do think that Arc Pro, unless you've got some unique customizations or you're still having to use things like geometric networks and all that, it's worth moving over to. If you've got new users, a lot of folks find Arc Pro a lot easier to learn than ArcMap and ArcCatalog because it's a much more intuitive interface. It's more like Word and PowerPoint and those kind of things. Is it perfect? No, but I would say, if you haven't, let's start moving. It's not as bad as you think it is, I promise. I used ArcMap when it first came out too. I went from ArcView to ArcMap to now ArcPro, so it's not that bad. So with that, guys, do we have time for questions? Yep, any questions? Comments? Rotten Tomato? Yep.
I want to mention attribute rules.
Yes.
Those are not backwards compatible.
No, they're not backwards compatible.
Right, attribute rules are a new feature in Pro.
Yeah, they're.
Once you implement them, you cannot go back.
Well, I think, no, ArcMap will open the tables and stuff, but you can't edit or anything because it doesn't understand those rules. But it is compatible with ArcServer, or Arc Enterprise, I'm sorry, and Portal and ArcGIS Online. And that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Arc Pro is heavily integrated with Portal for ArcGIS, Arc Enterprise, and ArcGIS Online, which can also be a gotcha because there's several ready-to-use tools in Arc Pro that eat up credits. So if you don't know that, you're not familiar with that, you've got to be careful because I was teaching a class in Fulton County, Georgia on Arc Pro, and we were looking at their credits in Arc Online after doing some tools, and suddenly the administrator saw their credit count ticking down very fast. Turned out they had an intern downstairs that was geocoding using the Esri geocoder in Arc Pro, which was eating up 100 credits per 1,000 record or 40 credits per 1,000 records, and they were trying to geocode 300,000 customer addresses for their utilities. So yeah, so be careful. They do put warnings in there most of the time. This will use credits, but they're really small. It's a fine print kind of thing, but it is there. Any other questions, comments? Mm-hmm.
Any insight on that? Is there an easy button?
There's no easy button, and that I would say is a common complaint, not just about Kogo, but a lot of folks say that what used to take them 2 or 3 clicks takes 4 or 5 clicks now in Pro. So the function's there. Is it as streamlined as it should be? Not in all situations. I think as more people move, we'll see those things improve. But yeah, no, there's going to be that. I've also found some people that think it takes more clicks, but when they go back to ArcMap, if they actually stop and go through every click they do, they find out not really. It's just they're just so used to it, they really don't remember how many steps it takes. So there's some, if you go back and actually count, it's not as bad as most people think it is. It's just I'm so used to it. I have that muscle memory. I don't over here. Sure. One more question, comment? Okay, well, thanks, guys. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you do have questions or something pops up later, I've got my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help any way I can.